Hi everyone and welcome to SAMA, an interview series which invites experts each week to discuss a topic in their area of expertise. This week we are delighted to have James Templeton to show us how we can overcome cancer and regain our lives. This is regain our quality of life. A fifth generation Texan, James Templeton tapped into his fighting spirit and became an over 30-year cancer survivor who healed himself from a terminal diagnosis with the use of alternative medicine and healing modalities. As the visionary founder of Uni Key Health Systems and the Templeton Wellness Foundation, James has since utilised his wisdom and experience to helping others achieve optimum health and wellness. James, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Oh, John, it's great to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
The thing I'd love to know first, before we go anywhere else, cut to the chase. Can you please share with us your story? How did you feel? How was it when you first got diagnosed with cancer? How did you know where to turn to?
Well, John, I was living in Texas, and I thought that everything was going great in my life. And I had a wife. I had a little girl that wasn't even 2 years old yet. And I had several very successful businesses. And I was, 32 years old. I was in good physical fitness shape, I thought. I was running. I was a runner, one of these guys you see running down the road, that everywhere you go, you see this guy running. I was that guy. Yeah. And the reason I was doing that is because my father and my grandfather both died of heart disease at a very young age. My father at 46 and my grandfather at 36. Well, when I was in high school and about maybe 17 years old, my father, he died. He just fell over with a heart attack. And after that, I just, I really, really kind of went through a hard time because I felt like, I'll probably be next, with this heart disease thing. And you also have to know that my mother died before I was even 2 years old of not a heart disease, but other diseases. And I had a little brother that died at the age of 8. So I had a lot of death in my family. So when my father died, I thought, well, what's the use? What's going to happen next to me? I might not make it to 30. So that's how I felt. I had this kind of what the use attitude. But I eventually, long story short, I became successful, a roundabout way, got married, settled down, thought things might turn around for me because I got into this physical fitness thing. And there was a guy back then, his name was Jim Fix. And Jim Fix was this guy that was a fitness guru in the United States, and he was a avid runner, and he felt that he wrote a book called The Complete Book of Running, and he felt that if you ran and you stayed in good physical fitness shape, that you could stave off heart disease. So I thought, well, I can do it if he can do it. So I got into this. That's what really drove me. But his father died at the age of 35. So anyway, I thought that I was doing the right thing. And one day I went to the office and I sat down in my office and I grabbed the newspaper from that morning and I started to read this newspaper. And I looked right off the bat. There was these headlines there and I looked at it. It said, running guru Jim Fix dies while jogging of a heart attack. And I'm like, oh my God, wait a minute. Am I reading this right?
Yeah.
So I started to look at that and I said, oh my God, I was in shock because I thought I was doing the right thing. So then I saw that this happened. I thought, well, I better get myself checked out because who knows, maybe I'm not as in good a shape as I thought I was. Mm-hmm. So I went as soon as I could to get a cardio stress test. One of these tests that you go and they get on the treadmill and they hook all these wires to you and they get you on that treadmill and they start you running a little bit, walking first, and then before you know it, you're running and then you're running wide open. Well, the doctor told me right then, he said, James, he says, you're in tremendous shape. Because I was running up to 60 miles a week at that point. And he said, you're in tremendous shape. He says, you're going to go a long ways. I don't think you have to worry about your heart for quite a while. And he says to me, he says, you broke the record in the office. No one's ever done this well on this treadmill test. So I felt pretty good about it. And I got excited, kind of like, oh, I'm doing something good. I'm successful. I'm a young guy, entrepreneur. I got life by the tail. Everything's going good. But on the way out, he kind of like looked at me after this full examination. He says, there's only one thing that I'm concerned about, and it's probably nothing to it. But he said, there's a mole on your back. And he said, that mole looks a little different to me. He said, there's probably nothing to it. But he says, you might want to get it checked out when you get a chance. He says, I wouldn't even worry about it, but it's just a little different. So get it checked out. So I didn't think much about it. So, a few weeks later, I decided to go get it looked at. So I went to a dermatologist. And when I walked into that dermatologist and he said, take your shirt off, I told him what the issue was, and he looked at this mole. Well, this guy got very excited. All of a sudden, he goes, oh, my God. He says, I think you might have melanoma right off the bat. And I went, melanoma? Well, I didn't know much about melanoma, but melanoma to me was not a very friendly sounding word, but I'd heard about these people that had cancerous moles and they died from the mole. And so it scared me. It scared me to death. And, and when this happened to me and the guy says, we might have to remove a large portion of your back tissue and all this, I didn't like his bedside manner. And I went from this guy that thought he had everything going to this guy all of a sudden that the fear just drowned in me. And I was just like, different person, just like that, and I left that doctor's office, and I said to myself, I won't go back to this guy. I didn't like his bedside manner because he acted like he'd won the lottery or something. He just was different. I didn't like the way he went on. He got excited, and it wasn't anything to get excited about. It was very scary.
Yes.
So I went home, barely made it home, and long story short, I ended up going to another dermatologist to get a second opinion, and he sent me on over to another doctor friend of his that was a renowned oncologist. And he says, it all looks suspicious to me, but he said, it's probably nothing, but I'm going to send you over there and see what he says. So when I got to the oncologist's office, he says, well, it looks a little suspicious to me also. He said, the only way we're going to really know what it is, let's just check it out. Let's see exactly what it is. Let's take it out. We'll do it right here in the office. So he took a big plug out of my back, about probably 2-inch square, right there in his office. And he says, just go on home. Don't worry. There's nothing you can do. He says, I'll give you a call in a few days and see what the lab says. Well, I went home and all I did was worry. All I did was pace the floor. I couldn't sleep at night. I was miserable. And it was almost 2 weeks before he calls me on the phone. And he says, I got some good news and I got some bad news. And I was, just like, well, what's the good news and the bad news? It's one of those kind of deals, it's like a joke almost, So he says to me, the good news is, he says, you've got melanoma. And I'm like, good news? He goes, wait a minute now. He says, but we think we got it all in this area, this perimeter area around this plug that we took out of your back. He says, I think we got it all and there's no signs of cancer, so that's a good thing. And then he says, the bad news is, he says, it's very deep. And he says, deep means that it's more likely to spread. It's stage 4. Stage 4 because they measured it on something called the Clark scale, and it was the way they measure melanomas. And he said it's very deep. So we're going to have to keep a real close eye on this because chances are this cancer is probably going to spread. But we got to keep on top of it. He says you come in every 3 months and we'll check you out, and from head to toe, we'll check, your lymph nodes and, everywhere, and we'll make sure that we stay on top of it. He says there's nothing you can do but just go home. Don't worry. Get back to normal life. It's just nothing you can do. Okay. So what did I do? I went home and I was a miserable guy. All I did was worry. All I did was, think about the end of my life all of a sudden, because I started to read a little bit, and we didn't have the internet like we have today. But I learned through several people that I knew that one was a doctor that said that people, you hate to ask people, but you want to know, people that had stage 4 melanoma were lucky to live 3 years. Gosh. And when I found that out, I just felt like my life was maybe over. And I was not a fun guy to be around. I lost my ambition. I was very ambitious before, and I was a happy-go-lucky kind of guy that liked to have fun and enjoy, and I felt good. And I had noticed, though, because people will say, well, if you felt so good, how could you get something like this? But I had noticed for the year or so or two before this that I was getting a lot of colds and a lot of flu. And every time, allergy season would come along, I have all these allergies that were really bothering me, and hay fever, and you name it. And I every time something would come around, I'd catch it. But here I am running and in shape and working out and all this, but I kept getting sick, and I felt like just not good, not that good some days. And I thought, well, it's just because I'm a little older. I was over 30. It's funny how you think, but I felt like, hey, I guess this is how you feel. You don't feel as good anymore. So I noticed that, but I didn't think anything about it. I just pushed myself harder, and and just kind of bypass it. But anyway, I became very hard to be around, and it started to create problems with my marriage. My wife didn't like my new. I don't think she liked it. My new kind of personality, my fear-based personality, my feeling that life was what's the use? Nothing mattered anymore, and all that. And I just was in depression, deep depression. So after about 6 months or so of this, she ended up leaving me, moving into town with my little daughter. And after that, I just didn't even care. I felt like, hey, what's the use? I'll probably die, and who cares? Here I had gone to the doctor for 2 times, and, everything checked out okay, right? But not long after my wife left me, I noticed a lump in my groin while I was taking the shower, and it didn't seem normal. And I went to the doctor, and he says, well, I think we need to, long story short again, I think we need to take this out and see exactly what it is. Let's get in there and let's take a sample of it and see. So I checked into the hospital, and here, I was just like petrified. And I go in, I wake up in the hospital, the doctor comes in. This is the same guy that removed it the first time, this world-renowned oncologist. And he comes in and he says, well, I'm sorry to tell you, James, he said, that this cancer has spread and it's in your lymphatic system. And he said, that's not what we wanted. We didn't want to see this, because now we really got a problem and we got to deal with it, because this is a very aggressive cancer and we got to do chemotherapy. He says, I want you to do 80 chemotherapy treatments. He said, we'll do experimental chemotherapy treatments. He said, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to elevate your temperature with typhoid serum. We're going to inject this serum into your veins and get your temperature up, and you're going to feel like you're freezing to death, which I did when I eventually did this. And he says, we're going to elevate your temperature, get your immune system revved up, as high as we can, and then we're going to induce the chemo through an IV. He said, this will take, 10 hours a day or something like that. He said, we also need to do a lymph drainage pump every day for several hours because you don't have any major lymph nodes now. They removed all the lymph nodes in my groin. And I was like, my leg was like that, it was just full of fluids. And he says, we don't want this to get so bad that you get lymphedema and you end up having to lose your leg. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh, great. Now I've got cancer. I got to do these treatments so I don't lose my leg. And he went on to tell me that I had a 20% chance of surviving 3 to 5 years if I could get through these chemotherapy treatments alive. And he said if I didn't do the chemotherapy, probably wouldn't have much of a chance at all. So here I was, in this deep state of depression, of you name it. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I knew there had to be something I could do, but I didn't know what. So I'm laying there, and I'm just miserable. I'm desperate to find an answer. And, I'd been recovering already from the surgery. But I think it all turned around because I got a phone call. And the phone call came right out of the blue. And it was a minister of mine at a church I went to from time to time. And this minister calls me up, and I knew him. He was a great guy. He was a runner like me. He was an ex-professional athlete, baseball player, older than me, but, just a tough, nice guy, good sense of humor, all that. He calls me up and he says, James, he says, you got to fight hard. He said, don't even think about giving into this. I've been praying for you. He says, lots of people in town have been praying for you because I was living in a smaller town in Texas, of course. And he says, we know there's something that can help you, and you got to just realize that you're not all alone, and I want you to fight like hell, he says, and I want you to, just don't think about giving up. Don't think about, that this is going to end your life. And he says, I want you to know one thing, you're going to beat this SOB in cancer, and he said it flat out, just like, like two sailors, on the ship, and it got my attention. And this guy came out with these words, and it shocked me because I just didn't expect it. And he got me right there. And I knew that I wasn't alone, and I had to start to pray. And I started praying. And I wasn't a guy that prayed a lot. I wasn't one of these religious guys. And I just was, I went to church. I was a good guy, but it just wasn't, So I started to pray, and I prayed hard. I mean, I prayed like, I don't know, it was out of desperation, but it was like every cell in my body that was like with me there in that prayer. I felt like there was an energy around me, John, like I'd never experienced, an out-of-body experience almost. And I felt that, I was going to get some kind of an answer if I asked God, to help me. So, it was probably about 20 minutes after this prayer, and this when things really started to get going. And a friend of mine knocks on my hospital door that I had not seen in over 7 years, an old buddy in college. That he walked through that door and he's waving around some papers in his hand, and he comes through the door and he tells me he was driving around the area and something, he had found out about this guy that had cured himself of cancer using a diet and lifestyle, and he had this book review. That's what was in his hand about this guy. And he said, I was driving around the area and near the hospital, and he said, something says, pull over, go visit him now. And he said, I had that feeling that I had to see you now. So he comes through the door, and I said right off the bat, I'm going to do what's in your hand. And he says, you don't even know what's in it. And I said, I don't need to know. I'm going to do it. Because I felt it, deep inside, this was my answer from the higher power. So I got excited right then, and I did read it, and I started to read it, and I said, if this guy can heal himself using a diet, a nutritional diet, and a lifestyle, then why can't I do it? And I could relate to this guy because he had this attitude. It's like he's going for broke. And he wasn't going to, he was going to knock heads with the cancer. He wasn't going to give in. He had a really strong attitude. And the guy he was actually a Hollywood actor. And he was an actor that had written a book, and he was grew up on a ranch in Montana. And I related to him because I had a little small farm, which I thought I was kind of a cowboy at one point. And I've always loved that growing up in Texas. And I related to him. So I had my friend run out and get that book for me. And I got very excited because now I had something to look forward to. I had some hope. I had my will was starting to kick in, and I started to believe that there was going to be something that was going to help me. So I got that book, and I got, very excited, and I just felt like this was going to work for me. I just felt it. So the next morning, I got another knock on the hospital door, and it was my stepmother. And my stepmother came through the door, and she had a book in her hand. And she walks through there with this book in her hand, and she didn't know anything about all this kind of stuff. Where we come from, we just you get sick, you run down to the doctor, and you eat the regular diet and all that. But we didn't know. We just you didn't know at this point, but I was learning real quick. So she had this book. It was about vitamin C and cancer. And it was about how people that were terminally ill would take high amounts of vitamin C, and they would get better, and they would stay alive as long as they take these high dosages of vitamin C. And the book was by a fellow by the name of Linus Pauling. And Linus Pauling was a research scientist, that had done a lot of work on vitamin C and cancer. And anyway, the book went on to talk about how important it was. And I got very excited about that. And I said, well, look, if it'll help these people, I'm going to do that too. So here I've got this diet. Now I've got the vitamin C. Now I'm getting excited. Now I'm starting to feel like, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too. So the next day, I got one more knock on the door in the hospital. It's the funniest thing happened. It was 3 days, 3 knocks on the door from things out of the blue that really helped me. So here comes a guy through the door, and he says, James, I'm the psychotherapist from the hospital, from the cancer ward. And he says, can I talk to you? He says, I know that you've been depressed. I know you've had a feeling that, things aren't, the outlook's not good. He said, can I come and talk to you and, just see if I can help you in some way? And I said, sure. But I want to ask you something right off the bat. I said, have you ever heard of something called macrobiotics? And that's what this diet was that I discovered. And he says, hold on a minute. He goes across the room. And I thought, I said something wrong. He don't want to talk about it. He left. What did he do? He went across the room, shut the door. And he shut it tight. He comes back over to me, and he sat down next to me by the hospital bed, and he says to me, look, I have heard about it, but I'm going to ask you one thing. If I tell you what I know, will you promise that you will not tell anybody about our conversation?
And he said, subsequent SEMA.
He goes, I don't want to lose my job or my pension and all that. I've been here for 25 years. And he said, they will throw me out of here tomorrow if they hear that we had this conversation. And I said, no problem, no problem. Now I thought I was really on something, because here's this guy in secret going to tell me something here. So he went on to tell me how he had really found out about the macrobiotic diet several years before, and he had found out that it helped a lot of people, and he had learned personally that it helped a lot of people. And he says it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of determination and dedication. He says, but if you do it, He says, and you do it the right way, I think it can really help you. He said, but you got to do it the right way. You can't do it halfway. And he said, I even tried it, but I couldn't stick with it because it takes a lot of time. And he says, I couldn't do it. But he says, you don't seem depressed, by the way, at all anyway. He says, you seem like you're kind of like a guy that's excited about something. And, anyway, he just really confirmed everything that I had been thinking and reading. And I got very excited. He told me 2 other books to go get. And he told me about a guy who was a doctor that wrote these books, that the guy saved his life, with this macrobiotic diet that was very conventional, and discovered it, and he was dying and he got well. And it got me excited. So now I'm very excited. And long story short, I'm almost finished with this part, but long story short, I left the hospital. I did my 5 chemo treatments, the first 5 chemotherapy treatments, barely made it out of there with them, but they were terrible. Yeah. I went home, got started on this diet and the vitamin C and all this stuff. And before I knew it, it was 2 months later, I come back for the next chemotherapy because I had to go in the hospital for a week. Because it was nasty stuff. Yeah. You're on your back, and I was very weak, and it made me so sick. They must have doubled or tripled it. But I got in that hospital, and I was so sick I couldn't eat. I couldn't keep anything in my stomach. And every night I would hear this commotion in the hallways, people dying in the hallway. I mean, they'd be rolling people down the hall, and I would find out that they weren't dying of cancer, they were dying from pneumonia. And I said, well, golly, I'm going to be next, as weak as I am in here. Yeah. And I remember hearing some nurses talking one day, who's been watching this man's temperature? His temperature is way over the limit. He could die in here, and you got to watch him. We got to cool his temperature down. So they put all this freezing towels and all these ice on me to cool me down. And I said right then, I was so out of it. I felt like I was about dead. And I said, I got to get out of this hospital because they're going to end up, something's going to happen to me in here. I didn't feel well at all. And so I asked the doctor shortly after that, and I said, listen, isn't there something else I can do? And he said, there's nothing else you can do. And I said, well, what would you do if this was your son or daughter doing this, going through this? I'd do the same thing.
Yeah, they'd say that.
And I said, well, I could die in here with this stuff. This is terrible. What about vitamin C, or a special diet or something? Doesn't that help? He goes, none of that. He goes, no, none of that. Waste your time. And after I said I could die from this, he says, well, we're all going to die someday, just like that. And when he said that, I was laying back in that bed, just really weak. I raised up in that bed and I looked at him and I said, listen here, Doc, if I could get out of this bed, I'd tear you apart. And I said, I didn't say it that kindly. I said, you SOB. I was so mad because I felt like my hope and my will and my determination was getting dragged out from under me. And I was so positive before I went in there, thinking I was doing all the right things. I was going to do a little of everything. So, you know what? I got up the next night and I made up my mind. I am out of this hospital and I'm not going to have anything else to do with it. And I'm going to get up and I'm going to war. I'm going to fight. I am not going to look back. And if this doesn't work for me, it's not going to work for anyone. I am going to scratch, claw, kick, punch, whatever I have to do to beat this cancer. And I started to get this energy, this fighting energy, really strong fighting energy. And I snuck out of the hospital at 2 a.m. And I crawled down the stairs, snuck down the hallway, down the stairs, and I got in my car and I drove off and I never looked back. And that's been almost 34 years ago that I've survived this stage 4 diagnosis. Now, I did a lot of changes in my lifestyle. But, it was amazing how when I got desperate, how the answer started to come through the door of that hospital room. And of course, it's up to me to do the work.
Right, you had all the signs there. You just got to follow the signs that have been presented to you.
Yes.
Gosh, that's a cool story. I sort of, I can feel the roller coaster of emotions, the high to the low, and then the rebuilding again. And what do you think would have happened if you had stayed in the hospital? What's your honest?
Well, you never know. And there's been people say, well, what do you think? Do you think the surgery helped? Do you think, well, it might have. And I say in my book that, I don't know. Maybe it did help. But I wasn't going to stick around any longer and end up like one of these people that got pushed down the hallway at night. And I was afraid to, and I felt like it was making me so sick because the doctor said I wasn't responding very well. So he said it was he felt like it wasn't working the way they had hoped. And I knew, as sick as I was getting, because they told me, you're getting sick if you can, get through this without getting so sick, it's a good thing. And I wasn't. And I knew that I had to do it. And, and I thought hard about it and meditated about it and prayed about it and, you name it. And it was a tough decision, but while I laid there, it didn't take me long to realize, you know what, I'm going for broke. I'm going for broke, just like this guy did on this actor in this other book, Confessions of a Kamikaze Cowboy was the name of that book. And I felt like, hey, I'm not going to look back. And if it doesn't work for me, it's not because I didn't give it 150%. And I don't know, I don't know if I would have been here or not, but I wasn't going to mess around to find out. I was going to change my lifestyle, my diet. I was going to get on everything I could that was anti-cancer, including diet, lifestyle, visualization, meditation, exercise in moderation, and not get so carried away with all this, and supplementation. Down the road, I learned about a lot of things over the years, but I was not going to look back and feel like I hadn't given it my all.
Okay. What do you think are the underlying root causes of cancers?
Well, the real problem with cancer is that, and sometimes I think cancer is an immune system issue. But the reason is I say that's because when people start to, especially as they get older, cancer is the number one killer from the age of 1 to 65. And when you get to 65 and older, it's heart disease. But, cancer is 1 out of 2 people are going to have cancer pretty much in their lifetime now. It's they say 1 out of 3 women, 1 out of 2 men, but it's getting close to 1 out of 2. But the reason is because people are eating so much sugar. Sugar feeds cancer. Sugar, high glucose in the system, from sugar. People eat 180 pounds of sugar a year in the United States. That's the average. And they're drinking, diet sodas and artificial sweeteners like, that are cancer causing. They've got terrible diets full of pesticides, full of preservatives. They're exposed to a lot of toxins, in their home, the household cleaners in their house. It's everything. It's like toxic overload. Every cancer patient is very, very toxic. And it doesn't surprise me or anyone else if they use common sense to know that when you start to eliminate the toxicity, you start to take a load off of the immune system. And the immune system is designed to get rid of cancer cells because we all have cancer cells in our bodies on a regular basis. And once they get out of control and they stay in the system too long and the immune system can't do its job the way it should, then all of a sudden we start to have real issues. And it sometimes takes 8, 10, 12 years for someone to develop full-blown detectable cancer by conventional, medicine.
Yes.
But it's a lot of things, John. It's from the bad water that they drink. It's to the bad fats in their diet. It's to hormones, bad everything. It's parasites, intestinal parasites, which is a big problem around the world. Parasites are a huge immunosuppressive problem. I found out that I had parasites through a world-renowned doctor that I met later on in New York City, and he was from Colombia, and he knew parasites. Not many doctors in this country know about parasites. There are probably more doctors around the world, but they're not trained in medical school, that much about parasites. So that's sometimes the last place they look. But parasites, are huge. And I went to see this doctor because I was convinced that I should go see him. And I went to him, and he did a special test on me right there in the office, and he found that I had several different types of parasites. I actually had a lot of stuff in my system, and I had been exposed to a lot of parasites. But anyway, he went to tell me right there in his office that he'd never seen a case of a case of cancer or AIDS that did not have some kind of parasitic involvement. So that got me to thinking right then. And, the other issue is that I felt like if I had it, that what about all these other people out there? So it got me interested.
Parasites as in worms?
Worms, microscopic parasites, which you can't see with the eye. Worms are like Ascaris, which is round worms like animals have, like dogs, cats, horses, you name it, they have parasites a lot. When you take a dog to the veterinarian, the first thing they look for is parasites.
Yes.
They don't look for like, oh, let's see how good a shape he's in or this or that. They look at, okay, let's see if he has parasites. That's the first thing they do. Is they do a tissue swab, through the rear of the dog. And they say, oh, he's got worms, let's deworm him.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. So why don't we have that kind of treatment, and when we go see a doctor, that's the last thing they look for.
That's right. And it's more to it than that too, James, because, as well as we do, that the medications that animals get are something in the order of 10 to 100 times cheaper than the human equivalent. And it's the exact same compound. In fact, when you're talking about the parasites, I thought, well, there's a capsules, IV something, the name of it. I can never remember the name, but it's dirt cheap if you buy it from a vet. Exact same drug, and all you do is you cut it into a quarter because it's designed for larger beasts than ourselves. And you take it, and this is the same thing, and there's zero side effects. It's not a poison to our own bodies. It's just poisonous to parasites. So why don't, when you go to a doctor, they take out one of these horse capsules, cut it into little pieces, and give you a little piece. There's no profit to be made. This is the difference.
There's no profit, and the insurance won't cover it. And unless you go in there and they go, everybody says, well, will my insurance cover it? And they'll say, well, how bad's the pain? Is it killing you? Do you feel like you fixed the keel over? Well, we better check you out then, So, let's wait until it's at the last stage, till you're about to keel over before we even send it into the insurance, because God forbid, we don't want them to, think bad of us or whatever. But yeah, you're right. If the money's in it, that's the money trail. You follow the money trail, and immunity is such an important thing, and you've got to detoxify on a regular basis. I always like to say diet, detox, and supplementation, is the key factors for treating cancer. And detox is a huge thing, because if you take the load off, of that, then you're going to have a stronger system. Your body's going to absorb better. You're going to get better nutrition. You're going to get better vitamins and minerals. And then you got to supplement with anti-cancer, I believe, Some people do it all through diet. I did it at the beginning, all through diet and vitamin C. But vitamin C is such a important thing, to really look at if you're dealing with cancer or immune issues, whether it's cancer or something else, heart disease. There's a lot of research. It's not just something I read in a book back then and people are reading occasionally. There's a lot of research, but there's no money in vitamin C again. No. There's no money in IV drips of vitamin C, and vitamin C can't be patented. So it's a natural substance.
So it was intravenously how you took vitamin C in the large doses. I was going to ask you this before.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't taking a lot of capsules. You're having it injected into your body.
I take a lot of capsules, tablets, capsules, and powder. Vitamin C. I've done this for years. I mean, I still take a lot of vitamin C. I think that today, the IV is very good, very important if you can do it, especially if you have cancer, because it's like a healthy chemotherapy for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you want to build up your immunity, and there's certain things that have been shown through tests. There was a test that Linus Pauling, the guy I was telling you about earlier, Linus Pauling and one of his research partners, Dr. Matthias Rath, R-A-T-H, they did a 15-year study on cancer and vitamin C, and also it was kind of it was a combination of different nutrients from vitamin C, lysine, proline, EGCG, which is a green tea extract. So what they did was they took all these people that had different kinds of cancer, so they gave them this combination to these people, and they had some were placebo and some were actually taking the supplements. But after 15 years, they discovered that cancer was a collagen disease, that cancer spread through the collagen, and 90% of people's cancer deaths are because of metastasis. When the cancer spreads through the tissues into an organ, creates a lot of inflammation. And then you start to have things like fluid on this and that, and fluid here, and other issues, and that causes the death a lot of times. But they discovered that when you took high amounts of vitamin C, that it built up the collagen in the system, and it made it very hard for the cancer to penetrate and to spread. And cancer has a certain enzyme called nagalase that is produced by the cancer cells that enables it to spread through the tissue. So the vitamin C makes it very difficult for that. But the lysine I'm talking about, what does lysine do? Lysine helps to destroy the nagalase. So they're using vitamin C, they're using nagalase destroyers, like called lysine. They're using proline. Proline helps build up the collagen layers also in the body. The collagen is like connective tissue all throughout the body. So the EGCG is just a very high antioxidant, anti-cancer substance that they believe that was important for this study. But they found that this stopped for a lot of these cancers, like, in the study, this is according to the study, that like in, like breast cancer, for example, prostate cancer, melanoma, like what I had, and so on, that a lot of these cancers were stopped in their tracks as far as spreading through the collagen after taking this amount of vitamin C and proline and lysine and EGCG for 15 years. This is a study that they basically don't want people to know about, I guess. And, the other thing, when you get back to vitamin C has a very similar molecular structure to glucose. And cancer loves glucose. It's sugar. It goes after the sugar. I mean, it just, people eat and they're just, if you have cancer, you can't have sugar. You can't have excess, I think, you can't have excess fruit.
Yes.
There's certain fruits that are healthy because they have the, the anti-cancer, the phytonutrients, there's certain berries, are good. And there's certain, but you get too carried away when you start too many fruit juices, in my view. There's other people probably say something else, but there's a lot of sugar, when you start eating a lot of fruit juice or drinking a lot of fruit juices and eating too much fruit. But cancer, you got to starve the sugar out of the body. When cancer can't get sugar, it can't survive very well. So, you got to keep the levels of sugar down. But what happens is, and when your sugar is low, then what happens is the cancer starts to go after the vitamin C because it starts to think it's the next best thing. Sometimes it goes after it anyway. So when it goes after the vitamin C, and once it's introduced to the vitamin C, then cancer cells commit suicide, which is called apoptosis. So they just disintegrate. I mean, that's the whole idea behind it, and that's what a lot of people say. Now, there's other things, that help all this too, but why wouldn't somebody take a lot of vitamin C if they have cancer or if they want to prevent cancer? I mean, I've been taking it all these years, and I'm still walking around, yes. And I know that the vitamin C, along with a healthy, very detoxifying diet and lifestyle, and just a healthy lifestyle in general, saved my life. It's just
you're walking proof, you're living proof.
Yeah, and I interview people every week, that have had stage 4 cancer, that have been written off, and a lot of them are alive 20, 30 years later. And what did they do? They changed their diet. Most of them took vitamin C. Most of them did. I mean, there's a majority. The majority of people changed their diets and all of them did, but they changed their lifestyle and they cleaned up everything, and they learned to kind of stay away from a lot of stress. There's a lot of things, but everybody's a little different. So whatever worked for me might not work exactly for the next guy. But I believe wholeheartedly that there's some key non-negotiable things that you have to look at.
Yes, a few good questions coming through on the on our online participants. Jan Jeffries is asking, what is the key factor in the metabolic diet? This is one thing we haven't discussed yet either. The metabolic diet, what it is, how it differs from other diets. And Jan's asking, what is the key factor for this diet? So I might as well take this opportunity to talk about the metabolic diet. What does the metabolic diet entail?
Well, the metabolic diet, I'm not really an expert on it, to tell you the truth, to be commenting too much on it, on a metabolic diet, because I'm more for just having a good, clean diet, really. That if you like, for example, if you have cancer, in most cases, I believe that you have to, slow down your consumption of red meat, and you have to slow down your consumption of animal food, because this starts to use up a lot of your enzymes, your trypsin and your chymotrypsin, which are very important enzymes. Enzymes help to destroy the cancer cells, and when you start to eat too much animal food, it's very, very important. But I also believe that you have to eat lots of cruciferous vegetables, which are anti-cancer, cancer-fighting vegetables that are very, very important. And you have to eat, there's allium vegetables, which are the onions and leeks, and garlic. Garlic is probably one of the major things you should be eating, with anti-cancer vegetables. But you have to get that, and I even ate seaweed. Seaweed is very important, and I believe in fermentation, and fermented foods like miso. But it's got to be really good quality. Everything's got to be organic. Throw everything else out, if you have cancer, and make sure you're drinking the purest water, eating the purest food, and you gotta eat lots of vegetables and protein. You got to have some protein, but I believe in beans, bean protein, like small beans like lentils, chickpeas, aduki beans. These are macrobiotic type beans. But I believe at the beginning, first year or two, you got to really clean up. And then as you get stronger, then you can reintroduce, some animal food, a little bit more. I mean, some people do okay with a little, but you gotta say, okay, I've been a vegetarian, strict vegetarian, for example. Well, maybe you need a little something, maybe it's affecting your glands or, your immunity or something. But I don't believe in one type of diet. I believe in just using common sense and using the good fats, the good oils, the good nuts and seeds, because if you take seeds and nuts like pumpkin seeds, and if you take the nuts like macadamia nuts, walnuts, almonds, those are very high in anti-cancer properties. So, and everything, you want to put everything in your diet that's anti-cancer, and you get rid of the dairy foods because this is inflammatory type foods. So you want to get rid of anything that causes inflammation in the body, and you want to get rid of anything that's considered like cancer causing, especially sugar again. And you want to, there's a lot of things. If you check out my book, and this book here, I Used to Have Cancer, everything is in there that I did, everything I would do if I had to do it over again. And there's no particular diet in there. It's just the basics, non-negotiable things in a diet.
Okay. Jan Jeffries asks another question with regards to the amount of vitamin C that you took. You took it in presumably higher doses before than now to maintain your health.
I took, back then, I took 20,000 milligrams because that's all I knew. In the book that I read, he said 10,000 milligrams of oral vitamin C. And I thought, well, I'll double it. So that's what I did. I took 20,000 milligrams of vitamin C. And to this day, I probably take about 18,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C. And I don't do it all at once. I spread it through the day because it's water soluble. So you want to make sure that, vitamin C, you'll just pee it out, if you, so you want to take it through the day. And I like a time released vitamin C. There's one that I like that's a powdered vitamin C. And all these are in the back of my book under resources. But, I still believe that it's important. And, and I guess you just can't get enough. The body doesn't manufacture vitamin C.
Right. Now, there's a Dr. Jensen protocol. This is a question asked by Fun. That suggests a lot of fruit juice for treating cancers. But of course, fruit juices contain a lot of fructose, which is sugar. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend yourself for people to follow that kind of protocol?
I'm not a fan of it, but that's just me, of fruit, lots of fruit juice if you have cancer. Now, maybe down the road you can't. I just feel that, you got to get away, because I didn't have any fruit for 4 years. And I just didn't. I didn't have fruit. All I had was all these vegetables, and I did eat whole grains. Now, back then, I probably wouldn't eat as many whole grains now as I did back then, because 50% of our diet back then was whole grains. But whole grains are very detoxifying, and they're also, prebiotic. So they create more, probiotics in your body, and the fiber does, and it's important. And I think it's okay if it's organic, but people have this thing, you can't eat very many carbs and all this stuff. But flour products, no. Lots of flour products. Flour products are very high on the glycemic index. So sugar is very high on the glycemic index. We don't want to create yeast and fungus in the body. Yeast and fungus, candida, is going to cause your immune system to go haywire. And some people even believe that cancer is a fungus. So why would we want to do that? Now, I know there's people out there that do all kinds of things, and maybe it's mind over body. Maybe it's believing so strongly in what you're doing that that's the key to getting well. Maybe that's the real key,
Well, maybe it's a large component of it, James, because when I listened to your story at the start of the summer, and I felt your despair, and you went down, and then you got that hope. You had the three visitors, which were beyond coincidence. It was like a divine intervention, and then you had that little candle of hope, and that grew into a blaze, and then your chocks were gone, and you're away. Maybe a lot of it is attitude, your optimism.
I believe it.
But also, you mentioned about praying. Now, praying is important. Praying is important for you because you're looking for help, and maybe that's a part of it too. You ask.
I feel that 50% or more is believing in what you're doing.
Yes.
And I believe that's just what I feel. I believe that that's as important as eating or anything, is believing. But you've got to find something to believe in, and you've got to realize that, hey, if I'm eating a plate of organic anti-cancer foods on a regular basis, if I'm visualizing getting well, if I am walking every day and breathing deep hopefully in clean air somewhere, if I am, sleeping 8 hours at night and getting a good night's sleep, and if I am cutting down on the stress that everybody, we're dealing with so much stress in the world we live in, and if I cut down on that stress, all these things, I start to believe that this is going to work for me, because if it don't work for me, it ain't going to work for anybody else. So, it's kind of like I'm going to war, and I got a whole bunch of weapons in my pockets, and I'm going to fight, and I got a better chance than most people, and I'm going to give it my all. And it's just strong belief and strong will, because there's times when you want to quit and give up, and there's times when you feel like, I just want to go out and have fun and don't worry about this anymore. And you have to also understand that when you first get cancer, this is a very, very important time to really dig in. You can't mess around with cancer, even if it's an early stage and they go, oh, it's only one, you don't have to worry. It's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Your body is trying to tell you something, that the body is out of balance, and you got to get it back to balance. If you don't, you're going to have a lot of problems. You might not survive much longer. So I believe, John, that you have to really, again, believe in what you're doing. You have to feel like that, you've got a lot of weapons in your pocket. You can, whether it's meditation, prayer, there's people that get well from just visualization. They visualize, hours during the day, they visualize and they get well. So, because it's such a powerful thing, this is so powerful, whether it's from, emotional visualization, meditation, just belief, pure old down home belief. And you got to surround yourself with people that are not negative. Negativity will just floor you, and it starts to suppress your immune system.
Yes.
And so it's all everything. So for me to sit here and say that, drinking fruit juice or doing this or this is not good or bad, it might be for this person, but it might not be. But myself, I'm going to stay in the middle somewhere, and I'm going to try to do everything I can, and I'm going to grasp it and believe in it, and I'm going to read everything I can that's positive, and I'm going to study what other people have done that have been successful, and I'm going to start to put that into work for me. And if I don't, then I didn't give it my best shot.
You sound like you refused to accept cancer into your body. You fired it. You gave it the boot.
I think that's part of it, because people just give in. I've got tired of seeing my friends, my family, my colleagues get sick with cancer and die. And they go see a doctor, and a doctor says, well, it doesn't look good. You got stage 4. And they go, well, that's not good. Well, you probably got 6 months or a year. Or they'll tell them a year. Well, they die in 6 or 8 months because they start to believe that. They believe that, hey, I guess I'm going to die. It's my time. I'll accept it. I'm going to, go on and leave the world. But I'm the kind that says I got a little energy left. And I don't want to accept that. And I'm not ready to go because I got other things I need to do. And I'm going to fight this till the end. And if they have to, physically take me down, they're going to have a hard time. I mean, it's just that. Like I used to know a lot of people. I lived at a facility, and all this is in my book again. But I talk about living with people that had cancer. And I was involved in this center, and I lived there. And I would see all these people that had cancer, and a lot of them had terminal, diagnoses. And so here I am. I'm thinking, they're such nice people. Everyone's so nice, and they're so wonderful. And why did this happen to them? They're too nice for this to happen. They just didn't want to fight like I did. I'm the kind that wants, give me the axe, and I'm going to chop the tree down. If that tree's going to stop me from surviving, I'm cutting it down. But they're the ones that would say, well, I guess I don't have the energy, or I guess. But who's for me to sit here and say that they're right and I'm wrong, or I'm wrong, I'm right and they're wrong? It's all up to each individual. And it's like a guy, I used to feel like when I was battling the cancer at the beginning, I felt like I was in the boxing ring with the world champion heavyweight boxer. And I didn't know how. I kept getting this vision. I didn't know how to box, but I had to somehow survive in that 10 rounds without getting killed. And I was somehow going to fight. And it's kind of like the old story you hear about a guy that says somebody was trapped under a car. We used to hear back in Texas, they'd say, oh, there's this saying about this guy was trapped under a woman or somebody that was trapped under a Volkswagen Bug. And some little old lady came and lifted it off of that person. Well, because we all have the strength. We just sometimes think we don't, or we forget that we do. And once you start to believe or get desperate enough, then gosh, you can do wonders.
Before today's seminar, I looked at some of your videos. I knew that you were a very strong person. I just thought it was because you're Texan. In your early life, you had your mother die, your father die, your marriage, and then, of course, the cancer.
Yeah.
I think those 4 travesties had a large part in making you the person you are now.
Could be, because I come from, I'm a 5th generation Texan, and we down there, they were pioneers. They were some of the first people that settled there, and they were real fighters. They were ranchers, and they were like, you're watching an old Western movie. And I think it's just in you, you can see my picture back here,
I thought it was a window.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's the window. That's how it looks outside here, But I just, for some reason, have that spirit. And I've seen people that have, fighting spirit. It doesn't have to be, let's go to, battle. It can be another kind of fighting spirit, but it's just gathering all the tools that you need and really sticking to it, whatever they are that works for you, because everybody's different. I say that again. And that's why I started my foundation, the Templeton Wellness Foundation, because I wanted to give back. And this book goes, is all about helping people, and all the proceeds go to that. I don't want to make any money. I just want to help people. I'm at the age in my life that if I can set an example, or I can give somebody else, information that from someone else's story, then it makes me feel good.
What's the best way for viewers to go to your website and get more information?
Well, you can go to my website, TempletonWellness.com, or you can go to IUsedToHaveCancer.com, and you can order the book on there. You can get it through Barnes and Nobles. You can get it through Amazon, of course. It's pretty much everywhere, and there's free downloads. If you go to IUsedToHaveCancer.com, there's downloads of the top 5 supplements that I use on a regular basis, and there's also 10 diet recipes that I use on a regular basis, and also there is kind of like my schedule, the things that I do every day when I get up in the morning, and what I would do and how I do it. I just want to give people idea of what I do, and this is all about prevention. This helps keep the cancer at bay, and none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I would have felt bad if I had just gone back to my old lifestyle and not cared, and I felt like after my 30-year anniversary from my cancer diagnosis, I decided it's time to do something. Because people, they say, well, how long has it been? Oh, 4 or 5 years, okay. But when you say 30 years, they say, well, he must have done something right. Because people with stage 4 melanoma usually don't survive no matter what they do medically, because when they tell you that, I mean, they know. But I don't believe, you just don't believe it. You just don't accept it, and you just go forward and you, but anyway, they can get a hold of me that way, and we'll love to answer their questions if they have any. And also, we have a restaurant guide that, and I don't know where your show probably goes it goes all over, but we have a restaurant guide in this country right now that is giving information on the healthiest restaurants in America.
Wow.
And this is new. We're still a work in progress, but we're getting close, and it's up. But we're still putting restaurants in. But they're organic restaurants that have the best oils, the best ingredients, all that, and they're rated on a scale from most of them are 4 and 5 stars. The ones we put in there, so they're really good places. So when you're out and about, you can search and you can find a good or healthy restaurant, because, I recommend if people have cancer, probably it's better to eat at home most of the time, for a while. But we want to go out and do things, and cancer is not a death sentence. We don't have to say, oh, well, I have cancer, I can't live anymore, so I'll just go die. That's just ridiculous. There's a lot of things you can do. You don't have to be, after you get everything kind of balanced out and you get ahead of the cancer, you don't have to live in a jail cell. It's right. You can still enjoy life and laugh and do something good for humanity like you're doing.
Well, yeah, we do our best. So yeah, and I'm really so happy that you've invited our request to be on our show, James. It's very touching, the story that you gave of your life. And
thank you so much.
Something which is hard to understand is how you came so strong through all the things that happened.
Well, I'm very passionate about it, because, and when I can help somebody, it goes about 100 times over. It gives me that much more strength, because I love to hear about people that have survived, or they appreciate something that we've tried to do. It makes you feel like that's why we were here. I was put on this planet to help others.
You're a big man, James. Everybody, James Templeton, thank you so much for coming to our show. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, John. You're a great host, and I appreciate it. And I'll hopefully talk to you down the road.
I'd love to meet you in person sometime. Come down to, well, it's not Texas. Where is it again?
I'm actually in Idaho. You come visit me in Idaho.
Idaho.
We'd love to have you. You can come to Texas too. I'm down north of Houston, but I'm in Idaho most of the year. If you come visit us, we'll show you around.
America's a great place. Thank you so much, James, and thank you for everyone for watching.